Record. Okay, good evening, everyone. It's good to see a lot of faces from Aguda Shalom, but what you don't see actually is my friend and colleague, Rabbi Avi Schwartz, who's hopefully you could see him, he's waving over there. So there's actually a number of his college students. He's at JLIC Rutgers, so you can see them over there waving. And not only is this a cross-institutional initiative, but cross-generational apparently now also. So we have diversity in many different ways, Baruch Hashem. And so it's my privilege to partner with Rabbi Schwartz, and God willing, in the future weeks, we'll be hearing from Rabbi Winston of Young Israel Merrick, as well as Rabbi Sprung from United Orthodox Synagogues of Houston in Texas. Rabbi Schwartz is going to give us a shir tonight. Topic is, boom, roasted. Why are Purim Shpiels allowed? But before Rabbi Schwartz, before I give you the mic, I just want to let everyone know who, I don't know how you haven't been acquainted. If you guys are on Twitter, you obviously know who Rabbi Schwartz is already. But for those who aren't as social media savvy, let me give you a very brief biography. Rav Avi Schwartz is the director of OU JLIC at Rutgers, along with his wife, Sarah, where he serves as the rabbi of the Orthodox community at Rutgers. He also works as a psychotherapist during the week when he is not at the Rutgers Hillel. And in terms of his education, he attended Yeshiva University for undergrad smicha, I presume the good old Rabbi Isaac Elchanan Theological Seminary, and for his master's in social work at YU's Wurzweiler School of Social Work. Rav Avi and Sarah have 3 kids, Noam, Yakira, and Daniela, all of whom are devout New England Patriots fans. So I guess we'll talk about Rabbi Weider's Sicha on sports another time then. Without any further ado, Rav Avi, thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure to learn with you and together with all of your constituents, your students who are joining you in person. And along with my community, Aguda Shalom, we're very thankful to be learning together. I also just want to acknowledge the presence of Marina Sapir, the head of our adult education at the shul, who has been very kind in partnering with me and ensuring different learning opportunities. Thank you for your partnership, and to all of our regulars, as well as to new people who are joining us this evening. Rabbi Schwartz, you have the floor.
Awesome. Thank you, Rabbi Kurtz. And thank you to everyone that who is joining in person, over Zoom. It is my pleasure to be here in New Brunswick, New Jersey. New Brunswick, not to be confused with East Brunswick, which hosts the best pizza store in New Jersey, known as Giddy's. I highly suggest trying Giddy's pizza when you are here. I do not work for Giddy's. I have no affiliation. I just highly suggest that you try it. By a show of hands, whether over Zoom or in person, who here has ever watched the show The Office on NBC? Okay, I got Yaakov in the back. Moshe, Rabbi Kurtz, excuse me. Okay, so a very famous episode of The Office aired right after the Super Bowl, if I'm not mistaken, in the year 2010. I could very well be mistaken, but I'm not usually mistaken when it comes to these Office things. If I knew Torah like I knew The Office, I would be the Gadol Hador. Unfortunately, the Gadol Hador position is not ranked by sports knowledge or NBC sitcom knowledge, so I am just a regular rabbi guy. In this episode, Michael Scott, who is the bumbling manager of Dunder Mifflin, a paper company, he decides to run a roast. A roast, as you may know, is as some people have an ufruf, people make fun of the host, people make fun of the guy at the center of the show. And Michael, after being made fun of by all of his workers in his Scranton office, he spirals into a massive depression. And you start thinking about it, like these roasts that happen on ufrufs are could be very harsh, can be very sharp. And, if I was that boss in the Dunder Mifflin office, I would have been distraught to hear what my underlings would think of me, and really just not holding back any punches. And so I started thinking about my own experience running Purim Shpiels. And so if you are familiar with the Yeshiva University Purim Shpiels, it is a very, very big deal. I think when Rabbi Kurtz and we overlapped in YU. I think we did, yeah. I think we overlapped in YU, and I was the director of the YU Purim Spiel for not 1, but 2 years. And my first year of the Purim Spiel, I did a video, and this video went viral, not for the best reasons. It was making fun, not even making fun, it was highlighting the differences between Rav Soloveitchik and Lubavitcher Rebbe, both of whom I have the immense respect for. And I actually have the stickers of both of them on the back of my laptop, which my students can see, even though you aren't able to see. Basically, some people didn't like it. Apparently, some zealots said, not good, making fun of rabbis. And they put an article on Yeshiva World News, which is not my reputable news source, but it was great because they linked the video in the article, which was great for my views. So as much as they did not like the video, they linked it in the article. So my video got a lot of views. But that isn't even the part of the Purim Spiel that I want to discuss. One of my writers, I had a writer's room in the YU Purim Spiel. He wrote an article, not an article. He wrote a segment in the YU Purim Spiel. It was Saturday Night Live themed. If you're not familiar, Saturday Night Live has been a running variety show on Saturday nights on NBC since the late 70s, I think. 77, I think it started. I could be wrong. I think there might be some people here who might be a little bit older than me that can confirm that. I'm pretty sure 77 is when Saturday Night Live started. And that was the theme of our Purim Spiel. One of the songs was about a YU Rosh Hashiva. I'm not going to mention this Rosh Hashiva, and I will tell you why in a second. This Rosh Hashiva was in Avelos. He was observing the laws of mourning after a parent of his passed away. And he was not actually at the Purim Spiel, which I did not consider when I allowed this writer to write his parody of him, portraying him and writing a song set to Do You Want to Build a Snowman from Disney's Frozen in 2013. Now, after this Purim Spiel was over, that Saturday night was when Purim happened. And apparently this Rosh Hashiva was really mad at the director of the Purim Spiel, which was me. And I do not like having YU Rosh Hashiva mad at me. That's not a good thing. That's not usually a good thing. So I wanted to find out why he was mad. Listen, every single year, YU makes fun and, parodies the Rosh Hashiva. So I wanted to find out, okay, why was he mad at me? So this YU Rosh Hashiva, always smiling. Okay, now I give it away for, who I'm talking about. And he says, which is why his musser, which is why his anger at me was even hurt more, because when he was mad at me, he was smiling the whole time and giving me big musser, which is like, it hurt even more, you can imagine. And so he says, you made fun of me and I wasn't even there. You made fun of me and I wasn't even there. I'm observing Avelos. And I was not even in the room when you're making fun of me. And obviously he's smiling this entire time when he's, tearing into me, which has made it, like I said, terrifying. And I apologize. And I said, how can I make it up to you? He says, if you cut out that segment before uploading it to YouTube, we're good, and you can come to my Purim studio tomorrow and I'll give you a bracha. And I said, okay, which part of me was like really upset because it was probably the best segment of the spiel. Okay, fine. I uploaded it to YouTube. I cut out the segment. Everything was fine. We were cool. But it did sting with me a little bit because like at the same time, he was onto something. I made fun of him, or I guess I allowed my writer to make fun of him, and I did not realize how hurt he would be that I was making fun of him without him being there. So knowing that Purim Spiels could, hurt people, making fun of them, why are they allowed at all? Generally speaking, if I was to make fun of Hallie Gordon, who is sitting right in front of me, Hallie's from Muncie. She's an engineering student at Rutgers, brilliant student. She's great. But if I was to make fun of her and say, Hallie, you are not a good engineering student. And I was be like, yo, everyone, Hallie is not a good engineering student. There aren't as many people in the base medrash as I'm portraying it to be. There are only about 10 of us here total. But if I was to announce it to everyone here and say, Hallie is a terrible engineering student, why would that be okay? It's not. I'm just making fun of Hallie, whether in front of her or not. I'm just making fun of her. Why is that okay? So I guess the question is, why are Purim Spiels in general okay? Yeah, we could say, okay, we have fun on Purim. We make fun of people on Purim. But why? What do you think is one major issue of Purim Shpiels in general? One major one could be known as Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara known as bad speech, evil speech, or making fun of others could fall into that category. Here's a fun fact. The Chafetz Chaim wrote a famous sefer on Shmiras Halashon, guarding one's tongue, literally. The Chafetz Chaim also wrote a very famous sefer that we learn more than his sefer Chafetz Chaim. What is that sefer? The Mishnah Brura. The Mishnah Brura, which is a sefer that we use all the time for, figuring out halacha on a day-to-day basis, or chaim, literally the ways of life. We use his sefer Mishnah Brura all the time. And what is he known for? He's known for his sefer on Bein Adam Lechavero, in interpersonal matters. We on a daily basis, we use his sefer dealing with interpersonal with God matters, but he is known for his sefer, his book, on how to treat another person by the way that we speak, which I think is a very cool point. So that being said, Lashon Hara is a pretty bad thing. So why are we saying, okay, fine, it's Purim, it's fine, Lashon Hara is okay. Lashon Hara is never okay. You heard it here first. Lashon Hara is never okay. Or is it? It's not. It's not. Lashon Hara is never okay. There are some big gedolim. That's a bit redundant. There are some gedolim, some big rabbis who were against Purim Shpiels. Rav Ovadia Yosef, the big Sephardi posek of the 20th century, who passed away about 10 years ago, he was very, very opposed in general to Purim Shpiels. Rav Moshe Sternbach, who is the head of the Eda Charedis, the main Haredi ultra-Orthodox, I hate that term, the ultra-Orthodox group in Israel, he was very opposed to Purim Shpiels. And Rav Pam, also another big posek, allowed jokes that were about him, not about anyone else, but he would allow jokes to be made about him. So right there, we have a little bit of an opening. He can be mochel on his kavod. How do we translate mochel on kavod? To be, I guess, pardoning and be an opening to why Purim Shpiels could be allowed, but not fully. And we'll get to that in a second. One major issue, again, within Purim Shpiels is malbin pnei chavero barabin. Literally means whitening the face of someone in public. Not literally whitening their face. You're not like going up to them, putting on like white face paint on someone else. That's not really how it works. That itself would be weird, but not an isser. Malbin pnei chavero barabin literally means to whiten someone's face by embarrassing them in public. And the Gemara in Bava Metzia, Daf Nun Tes Amud Aleph, and Gemara Sota on Daf Yud Amud Beis discuss how we know embarrassing someone in public is bad. It's better to be thrown into a fiery furnace than to embarrass someone in public. And how do we know that? We know that from anyone. Yehuda and Tamar. Yehuda and Tamar was a story that happened in Parshat Vayeshev, which we read about 2 months ago in the Torah, where, long story short, Yehuda gets his daughter-in-law pregnant. I know it's a very shortened story for a long story short. Just trust me on this. And so Yehuda hears that his daughter-in-law is pregnant. He doesn't know that he's the one that impregnated her, and he says, bring her out to the fire, and she should be burned because she got pregnant outside of marriage, which again, questionable. Trust me on this. Very weird story. As this is the TLDR, the long story short. And so Tamar could very well say, yo, you're the one that got me pregnant, but she decides not to embarrass him. What she does do, though, she accepted some payment for his tryst with her months before, and says, whoever's staff and signet this is, that is the person who got me pregnant. So Yehuda, being the good guy that he was, says, you got me. Those are mine. And he acknowledged that he was the one that got her pregnant, and he did not have her killed in the end, because that would be really ironic. And from that union came David HaMelech, King David, and eventually Mashiach, the Messiah, will have came from that union. And we know that Tamar was willing to get burned at the stake instead of embarrassing her father-in-law, Yehuda, her former father-in-law. Good question. I don't know. But we know that it is really bad to embarrass someone in public. It's better to be killed at a stake than to embarrass someone. That's stake, S-T-A-K-E, not S-T-E-A-K. Very confusing. I was very confused at first. Steaks are good. Other steaks are bad. Meat steaks are good. Burned at the stake is bad. Just write that down. So we know that Purim Shpiels, however, are a historical Purim tradition. Even so much so, the big yeshivas in Europe, forget YU, bigger yeshivas in Europe have had Purim Shpiels for generations. The yeshiva of Volozhin was a very big yeshiva, and they were known for their Purim Shpiels. Volozhin, we know Volozhin was like big yeshiva in Europe, or Chaim Volozhin, it's a big deal. So much so, the Netziv, Rav Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, he had a Talmud known as Rav Avram Yitzchak Cohen Cook. Rav Cook learned in Volozhin. The father of religious Zionism learned in Volozhin before he went to Israel, and they say that Rav Cook used to do the best impression of the Netziv. He used to do the best impression of the Netziv when he was in Volozhin. Apparently, it was hysterical, and so much so that later on in Rav Cook's career, after he started Merkas HaRav, the Netziv's grandson, the circle of life, and Netziv's grandson used to do a great impression of Rav Cook. How sweet is that? Nothing like the old circle of life. But we see some big Gedolim. Big Gedolim used to be very involved in Purim Shpiels. And we're not saying that the Netziv and Rav Cook and the Netziv's grandson were like Rashayim. They were terrible people that did Purim Shpiels. So there has to be some kind of opening into why Purim Shpiels are okay. So we mentioned before that maybe there could be some permissibility when doing Lashon Hara. Not really, but we could try to find some kind of opening. So what about if we say Lashon Hara derech schok? What if we say Lashon Hara that is in the way of, having fun, just kidding, these people that just make a really terrible, obnoxious comment, say, I was just kidding, it's fine. So generally speaking, that's not okay. So much so that the Chavetz Chaim says that Lashon Hara derech schok is Lashon Hara mamish. It is still very much so Lashon Hara. The Rambam, Rav Moshe ben Maimonides, says Lashon Hara derech schok is avak Lashon Hara, the dust of Lashon Hara. It's not full on severe Lashon Hara, but it's cutting it pretty close, and you want to stay far away from avak Lashon Hara, the dust of Lashon Hara. So we mentioned potentially there could be mechila. What is mechila? Forgiveness, the implicit forgiveness that you would have if like, for example, when we said Rav Pam was okay when people were making fun of him, because he says that I'm okay if people make fun of me, but I'm not okay if you make fun of anyone else, only me, which is selfish, but in the other way, the anti-selfish. Usually when you say only me, it sounds like a really selfish thing, but in this case, he was being selfish for the honor of everyone else. Really noble, in my opinion. Rav Pam says you can only make fun of me. I am being mochel on my kavod. I am being forgiving of my honor, and that is why it is okay for you to do Purim Shpiels. Otherwise, it's not okay. So is that okay? What if everyone comes into the YU Max Stern Athletic Center where the Purim Shpiel happens? Instead of checking for vaccine cards, they say, are you okay with us making fun of you? Check off. Are you wearing a mask? Fine. Are you okay with everyone making fun of you? Check off. If everyone consents, consent is very important, especially on a college campus. Consent is very important. If everyone consents to being made fun of, is that okay? What would you think? It sounds like that would be okay. For example, going into other realms of halacha, one form of damages that can be paid for if someone damages another one is embarrassment. If someone embarrasses another person, they can be paid damages for that embarrassment. However, for every other kind of damage, there can be implicit mechila, saying it's okay, you don't need to pay me damages if there is implicit mechila. For example, in Maseches Sukkah, in Tractate Sukkah, is there a good way to translate Sukkah? Not tabernacle, that's Mishkan. I don't know, not really. In Tractate Sukkah, there is a discussion that if there are some activities that are presumed to not be good, but there is an automatically assumption of mechila, and in Maseches Bava Kama, it discusses damages that happen when doing a davar mitzvah. When doing a mitzvah, imagine you are running to save the day. You are trying to bring someone to the hospital and you run over their bike. If you are, doing a mitzvah, there might be a case when you run over their bike and you don't need to pay them damages. It's questionable, but there is a discussion that if you're doing a davar mitzvah, if you're doing a permitted mitzvah activity, then any damages that are caused from that, you would not need to pay back to the damaged party. And there is presumed mechila, there is presumed, forgiveness, because they understand that you were doing a mitzvah. It doesn't fix this guy's bike necessarily, but there is potentially a presumed forgiveness when doing a davar mitzvah. So you might be able to say that, okay, so there is a mitzvah to do Purim Shpiels. There's a mitzvah. It's Mordechai said to Esther in the Megillah, you should send Mishlach Manos, Ish L'Ra'ehu, you should have Purim Shpiels. You should make fun of people in your yeshiva. I've read Megillah Esther many times. That is not one of the lines that I've seen in there. But I wouldn't say that doing a Purim Shpiel is a mitzvah that needs to be done on Purim. I don't know. But also, when talking about doing a mitzvah, let's say someone is celebrating the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, the celebration of the water in the Beis HaMikdash, and someone is dancing too crazy for a general mitzvah and breaks another person's arm by accident. That could be a case where they are dancing for a mitzvah and damages might not be necessary in this case. In any case, this heter would still be very limited, and it's very unclear if this would apply to emotional damages. And in any case here, we're talking about monetary forgiveness. In this case, we're talking about, the broken arm, we're talking about the broken bike. Those would be monetary damages. You need to pay for the medical bills. You need to pay, for the bike, because now little Timmy can't ride to the ice cream store to get a Tootsie Roll for 5 cents. Did I do that right? I don't know. I'm sorry. That's what I heard from the generations before me, that Tootsie Rolls cost 5 cents. Is that true? I don't know. I don't know. But okay, I'm getting some nods. That's good. So in any case, we're talking about monetary damages here. So the monetary damages are very different than emotional damages, because it's very not clear if the forgiveness works the same way. It's fine. Okay, you know what? Okay, you were doing a mitzvah. You don't need to pay for my broken bike. You're trying to save this person's life. You don't need to pay for my broken bike. You don't need to pay for my broken arm. If I was dancing Simchas Beis HaShoeva, okay. But for monetary damages, it's one thing. But for emotional damages, it might not work the same way. So if you want to say we're going to check off every single person's Mechila damages card when they walk into the Maxter Athletic Center at Yeshiva University, say, I am mochel, I am forgiving of anyone that makes fun of me tonight. Some people might be checking it off just to go inside, but is it really a genuine forgiveness? Are they really okay with being made fun of? Because it's not clear. What if someone sneaks in? What if someone sneaks into the athletic center and says that, like, I'm fine, but he didn't really consent to being made fun of. So you have to make sure that everyone at the Purim Shpiel consents to be made fun of, and it's a genuine consent. They might be okay with being made fun of their weight, but not being made fun of their terrible grades. Like Hallie, for example, terrible engineering students. Again, totally kidding. She is a great engineering student. But she might be okay with making fun of some things, but not other things. So who knows if it's really a genuine consent of mechila, of being made fun of. So the problem is you're not sure if everyone consents genuinely, and that's a problem. So you can't really use the mechila consent as a general heter, as a general permission for doing Purim Shpiels. So let's discuss another concept in Hilchos Lashon Hara. There is a halacha that is brought up in the Gemara, in Erchin, and in, I forget where, Baba Basra maybe? Bishavis? I don't know. There's a Gemara that says any Lashon Hara that is brought up in front of 3 people is not considered Lashon Hara. Right? I gotta feel like, huh? Really? If I say Lashon Hara in front of more people, it's fine. If I say it in front of 2 people, Lashon Hara, you're a terrible person. But if I say it in front of 3 people, if I say Lashon Hara in front of Hallie, Sandra, and Buzzy, that's fine. If I don't include Buzzy in this Lashon Hara fest, it's not fine. How is that possible? So there are 4 interpretations in the Gemara of why this would be the case. So it's brought up in 2 places. So Ape Tlasa, even like the Rambam brings it down, that this is a real heter, a real what's the word? How do you translate heter? Like permission? Dispensation. Wow. Good word, Rabbi Kurtz. Great word. I was trying to find that word for years. Dispensation. This is a real dispensation used in halacha. So why is saying Lashon Hara in front of 3 people okay, but any less than 3 people not okay? So there are 4 understandings of this dispensation. Thank you. So the Rambam says, if something is said in public, there is no Isser, anti-dispensation, to repeat it. No, a prohibition, probably. Prohibition is probably a better word. There is no prohibition to repeat it if it's said in public. But the other commentators say that there are 2 types of Lashon Hara according to the Rambam. One could be the characteristic of embarrassing friends. There is no dispensation for that. Just to embarrass people, it's not okay at all. But spreading the knowledge, spreading some already public knowledge could be okay if you're saying it in front of 3 people, because once it's said in public in front of 3 people, then spreading it to another three people might not be an issue. Fine, that is the Rambam's understanding that if you're saying it in public, it's okay to repeat it and to pass it on in public. The Rashbam was another Rishon, an earlier of the commentators. Fun fact: who was the Rashbam's grandfather? And Rashi, Sandra knows. Rashi was the grandfather of the Rashbam. The Rashbam has another understanding of this dispensation. When the original speaker of the Lashon Hara says something in front of a crowd, everyone knows 3 is a crowd, right? Is that the line? 3 is a crowd. So what? Three's company. But I think company, crowd, it's the same kind of word. Okay, maybe. I'm not an English linguistics major, but it's possible. So when the speaker says something in front of a crowd, he knows it's going to spread, so it's permitted to repeat it. So what's your question on that? What's the permissibility to say it for the first time? It's okay if you hear it in public that you could spread it around because it's already, he knows it's going to spread. But who said you could start spreading it? So maybe some people say the Rashbam is talking about when he's talking about himself. If I'm making fun of myself as a terrible engineering student, which I am not a terrible engineering student, in front of myself. And I would say, Avi Schwartz, I am a terrible engineering student. Hallie and Sandra and Buzzy and Ari and Shira and Yaakov are like, yo, Avi said he's a terrible engineering student. But I said it about myself. So at this point, okay, it's public knowledge. Everyone's heard it. So, okay, fine. Maybe according to the Rashbam, when I say it in public, I know it's going to spread. And the people know that it has already spread, are saying it to another 3 people. At that point, it might be okay to spread the public knowledge more publicly. Again, that's only assuming A, it is for the people who are not hearing it for the first time. But unless it's the person talking about himself, it doesn't seem like the original spreader has permission to spread it. So that's something else we have to keep in our minds. Rabbeinu Yonah, our Rabbi the Dove, literally translated, right? I'm not wrong. Rabbeinu Yonah says it has to be Lashon Hara l'toeles. L'toeles means for a purpose, for a good purpose. If you are making fun of someone for a good purpose, that something is going to change, that something might change for the better, then it could be permitted. For example, if I was to make fun of Hallie for being a terrible engineering student, but it would spur Hallie to really get back into her studies and to get inspired to do even better in engineering, she knows that, okay, I might be making fun of her, but I know it's going to inspire her for good change, which could mean that, according to Rabbeinu Yonah, that might be a permissible way to say Lashon Hara in front of 3 people. But if you say it in front of one person, it's not necessarily going to be for a good change. Maybe for communal change, also that could work. If we're saying, I'm making fun of the entire Rutgers minion for talking during davening. This one's real, by the way. This one's a real making fun of them. Hey, look at me. I'm a guy at Rutgers Hillel. I am talking during davening. Ha, ha, ha. So I'm hoping that Hallie and Sandra and Buzzy and Shira and Yaakov and Ari are going to hear me making fun of them and are going to spur to change to not talk during davening. We good, guys? We good? Great. So that is Rabbeinu Yonah. If it's going to spur change in front of three people, you know it's very well going to spur change. If it's less than three people, you're just kind of making fun of someone, it's not necessarily going to spur change, because if a person is aware that other people are aware of their flaws as well, it might spur them for change. Spur for change. I don't know if there's any other kind of word that spur is used as a verb with. Right? Is there any other term? Spur of the moment. That's not a verb. That's a noun. Spur of the moment is a noun. The spur of the moment. To spur for change. I think that's the only way. Or San Antonio Spurs, also a noun. Yaakov, what?
No, I was just going to tell you that was a noun.
It's a noun. Yeah, it's a noun. So to spur someone for change is a verb that I would not see anywhere else. Like scantily clad. I've never seen the word scantily used anywhere else except by the adjective clad. You don't say, hi, I am scantily happy. It doesn't work. But if I know it's going to spur someone for change, then it could be permissible to say it in front of three people. Then there is Tosfos. Tosfos. The additions. I'm trying to think of the right way to translate Tosfos. The additionals, which included the Rashbam, who was the grandson of Rashi. Very good. Says that it is very possible that if you say Lashon Hara behind someone's back, then it's very bad. But if you say it in front of them, you might think it's worse because you're embarrassing them in public. But if you say it in front of that one person, it's not Lashon Hara. Sorry, other way around. Let me think. What am I saying? If you say something behind their back, that would be bad. And if you say it in front of them with a lot of other people, that would be really bad because they're hearing that you're making fun of a lot of people. You might think that is bad. So Tosfos says, maybe you would think that it's bad, but we're not talking about something outrightly negative. If you were saying, hey guys, Hallie's a terrible engineering student, that is pretty outwardly bad. But let's say I'm talking about Buzzy, for example, and I say something that's not outrightly negative, but it could be something positive that could be interpreted negative. It could be interpreted positive. Like, for example, I say, that Buzzy guy, Livingston, New Jersey, Buzzy Brickman, that guy, you can always count on Buzzy, you can always count on Buzzy. It can go either way, because some people might say, you can always count on him. He's always one of the first guys that shows up in the Chabura. Or you can say that you can always count on Buzzy for a negative reason. I muted myself, which was like the funny part. I didn't say anything actually out loud negative about Buzzy, but you get the idea. Buzzy's a great guy. He's off the market, unfortunately. But, so if it's something that could be spun in a way, it could be negative, it could be positive, then saying it in front of this person might not be fully embarrassing, and everyone can assume that you're saying it in a positive way because the guy is there. And if you see the guy's there, no one would make fun of a person right in front of them, so you could assume that it is fine to spin it in either direction. So, like, for example, no one would bash a person right in front of them and say mean-spirited things right about them, right? For example, if this was a real drasha and I was seriously talking about Hallie being a terrible engineering student, I would not get up and say in my drasha, in this week's parsha we learn Hallie's a terrible engineering student. A, first of all, the Torah does not say that. And B, I would not say any mean-spirited thing about Hallie in front of her. That would be obnoxious. Behind her back, maybe. That is more common. I would still not do that, but it's more common to talk Lashon Hara of people behind their back. As terrible as it is, you would make fun of people in front of them in a mean-spirited way. So that is the understanding of Tosfos. So now, let's talk about our actual heter for doing Purim Shpiels, because I think if we combine a lot of these, we could be onto something why Purim Shpiels are allowed. Spoiler alert, Purim Shpiels are allowed, assuming, we're able to get all these concepts and make sure we check off all the boxes that, it is really okay. Make sure that everyone is really okay with being made fun of and figuring out how that could be. So on Purim especially, there is an atmosphere of love and affection. We're talking about just brotherly love. Granted, I know Matanot Evyonim is talking about gifts to the poor people, but in general, there is a spirit of achdus, there's a spirit of unity and love, brotherly love, avas chinam, free love, unconditional love. Unconditional love is the better translation of avas chinam. Wow, okay. Avas chinam, unconditional love of Am Yisrael, that is the spirit of Purim. So on Purim, when there is an idea of avas chinam, of unconditional brotherly love of Am Yisrael, we are one big happy family. And just like all happy families rib on each other and we make fun of each other, in ways that families do. I hope we have good relationships with our families, but part of having a good relationship with our family is pointing out their idiosyncrasies and their little pieces of their personality here and there, which, for example, at the YU Purim Spiel, we would do great impressions of Rav Herschel Schachter. We do great impressions of Rav Herschel Reichman, of big Rosh Yeshiva, because we love them. And so showing love is by showing how well we know them very well. We had in the olden days of YU, I guess a couple of years before I was a director, we had one guy who did the best impression of Rav Shalom Karmi, the best impression of Rav Karmi. And Rav Karmi thought it was hysterical because it shows that this student really knew him well. And so by that making fun, it was an atmosphere of love, an atmosphere of mutual respect and avas chinam, because we're one big happy family, especially on Purim. Now let's talk about the end of the episode of The Office that I was referring to before. In the beginning of the episode, Michael Scott is absolutely distraught because his coworkers were making fun of him, and he really saw how they were, tearing him to pieces about how he's a terrible boss and he micromanages and doesn't even do a good job of micromanaging. He was distraught. He was depressed. But at the end of the episode, he has the confidence to come back in and turn the tables. Wow, how the turn tables, as he would say. And so, anyone seen that scene? Yeah. Good. Yaakov's seen it. So he goes back and starts making fun of Jim. He says, Jim, you're 6'7" and look like Gumby. And Jim starts smiling. And he starts making fun of one by one. Oh, Angela, I didn't see you there. You were hiding behind that piece of rice. Angela's a smaller woman. He starts making fun of everyone in the office, and people start giggling, people start laughing. And the guy who is the most serious guy in the office starts cracking up. And then Michael keeps going with his jokes, and everyone's cracking up and having a good time. In the first part of the episode, it was all directed at him. It was all directed at him and just making fun of him. And we were not showing any avas chinam. In the office later on, it was one big happy family in the office of Dunder Mifflin in Scranton, Pennsylvania, where Michael realized how his office really does love him, and his coworkers realized how he loves them. And it was a nice, real kosher Purim spiel without the Purim that was happening in that office. Part of what we strive for in Purim is a sense of humor. Why? Why do we strive for a sense of humor in Purim? We know that even HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that God has a sense of humor. How so? We say in Baruch Nafshi that God plays with the Leviathan. He's Mesachek B'Liv Yason. We say that he plays with Leviathan, which is a huge fish. There's only one Leviathan. Because if there was more than one Leviathan, they would procreate. And procreating of a huge fish would lead to the shores of the Hudson River and the Atlantic Ocean covering this place faster than global warming will. So, which is why God only has one Leviathan to play with and leaves the other one to be used for the Suda, for the meal, for the Tzaddikim when Mashiach comes. And hopefully we'll be able to use the skin of the Leviathan for the Sukkah. Amen. That's not the end of this year. Almost though. That sounds like it will be the end of this year, but it's not. It's not. We're almost there. So we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu has fun. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a sense of humor. He plays with the Leviathan, and we are known to be the halachta b'drachav. We're supposed to walk in God's ways. We're supposed to emulate God's characteristics and God's midos, the same way that God is supposed to be. That God is forgiving and he is merciful, so are we supposed to be forgiving and merciful. The same way that God has a sense of humor, we, Am Yisrael, we're supposed to have a sense of humor as well. And we should not always take things seriously. That is part of the idea of Purim. However, on the flip side, there is something called late sanos. Late sanos, how do we translate late sanos? Mockery. You see, there's having a sense of humor, and then there's mockery. Mockery sounds like a really bad word, mockery. Any R word has a really, R word sounds evil. For example, it's called murder, not muckduck. That's a line from The Office. It's not my line. Also, like I said, I love The Office. It's called murder, not muckduck. Any R words are intimidating. So, for example, mockery. Mockery is a really bad word. Late sanos, every Rosh Hashanah, every Yom Kippur, we say, lots new. And we clap, we clap, we bang our chest, we say, we have made a mockery of things. We've made a mockery. So on the one hand, having a sense of humor is good. On the other hand, making mockery of things is not good. So how do we define the difference? Amalek, as we know, as many of us know, Amalek was the first nation that tried to destroy Israel after they left Egypt. And so they are known as a lates. They are known as people who are mockers. Mockers who try to take the importance out of important things. They try to say, God's not actually their savior. God's not actually great. Watch, right now we are going to destroy the nation of Israel and we'll make a mockery of God. Amalek is the quintessential mocker. They are the types of people that will make Purim Shpiels and make mockeries of important things. The goal, however, of a Jewish sense of humor is to differentiate between what's important and what's not important. If you were in a relationship, you know that there are some things that are deal breakers. There are some things that are not deal breakers. There's some arguments that you think are very important now, and we say in 5 years from now, in 5 minutes from now, we're not going to remember this argument. So it's being Jewish and having a healthy relationship with Bein Adam L'Chavero, with other people, is to recognize what is important in the relationships and what is not important, and to recognize that some things, you can take lightly, but some things are really to be taken seriously. Some things in relationships, you have to recognize that they are actually deal breakers. Anyone who overshoots and starts making fun of things that are actually important starts to take away the importance and the solemnity. Did I use the word right? Rav Kurtz, what's the word I'm thinking of? The gravity. The gravity of the important topics in our lives, which I guess comes back to, my interaction with the YU Rosh Yeshiva from 8 years ago. 8 years ago, oh my gosh, I'm getting old. 8 years ago, when I was the director of the YU Purim Shpiel, and I'm talking to this YU Rosh Yeshiva, it wasn't just about the fact that he wasn't there. The things that we were making fun of, he took very seriously. His shiur is known for being very laid back. If someone can't make it to shiur, it's okay. And so part of the spiel that we were making fun of was that people don't actually show up to his shiur. It's saying, hey, do you want to come to Seder? It doesn't have to be night Seder. Okay, bye. And so he took that very personally because he says, my shiur, I know that people don't necessarily come to my shiur and I'm not so hard on them because of it. Why? Because I have a lot of pre-medical students in my shiur, and I know sometimes their priorities are shifting. They might have a huge biology exam one day. They might have a huge MCAT coming up they need to study for. So that's why I am very easy on them. So by making fun of my shiur, you are taking the chashivas, you are taking the importance out of my actual goal of trying to get these guys to learn Torah and not being fully on their backs. So this rabbi really tore into me because for two reasons. A, he was not there. So I was making fun of him. I was responsible for the fun being made of him behind his back. And B, I allowed the writer to make fun of the things that he held sacred, which was his shiur, that he is very laid back. So using these ideas, I have no doubt that Congregation Agudat Shalom and any of Young Israel of Merrick and United Orthodox Synagogues of Houston and the Rutgers Hillel, we will have fantastic Purim Shpiels, I hope. please do not let me down. I hope we have great Purim Shpiels, because we know we are going to do Purim Shpiels in the most kosher, mahadrin way possible. We are going to make sure that everyone is okay with being a part of the Purim Shpiel, whether we're making fun of them or not, because whether it's to be in person or not in person, we want to make sure that everyone is being mochel on their kavod, that they are being forgiving of being made fun of. And also, let's not take it too far. If we take it too far and make fun of things that, are profane, making fun of the sacred and turning them profane, that would not be so good for the things that we hold sacred in our lives. So I want to thank everyone for being a part of this year. I want to thank my students at Rutgers, Hallie, Sandra, Ari, Buzzy, Shira, and Yaakov for being a part of this, and for everyone whose faces I see, and for others whose names and pictures I see. My friend Daniel Albert, who joined us as well, and of course, Rabbi Kurtz, who has hosted this Zoom, as well as starting this incredible program of Achdus between Am Yisrael, between the 4 different states around the country that we're all located in today. If anyone has any questions, I'll be more than happy to entertain them. Thank you so much to everyone for joining.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Schwartz, for your time. This was a fantastic topic, very timely, of course. So Rabbi Schwartz has until 8:30, so we need to be conscious of his time. If anyone has a question, can you either raise your hand physically or through Zoom? If you need to figure out how to turn on your video or how to turn on the hand, I'll give you a second to figure that out. Rabbi Schwartz, an interesting question, I think it's interesting, it occurred to me, is that a lot of what we're discussing is making fun of or satirizing individuals, but I think right at the end, you talked about satirizing a group of people, like that shear. So, for instance, there is debate, in some circles, it's passe for an Ashkenazi guy to make fun of a Sephardi stereotype, or for a Sephardi comedian to make fun of an Ashkenazi stereotype.
Rabbi Kurtz, I'll stop you right there, because I'm a half-blood. I'm a half-blood personally. So I am Ashkenazi on my dad's side. I'm Sephardi on my mom's side. So I got it covered in both ways.
Did you say you're blood?
I am a half-blood. I'm a half-blood.
Okay. So I'm curious, based on the principles you set forth, would there be permissibility? Could we extrapolate from the permissibility to satirize particular individuals to broader social groups?
So that's a great question. I would think that in the case of the shear that our Shpiel made fun of, that it wasn't satirizing the guys that don't come to shear, because I think the guys that don't come to shear were at the Shpiel, and they know that these types of guys are made fun of for not going to shear. We could use Rabbeinu Yonah's heter, his dispensation, for saying if it could spur them to change, maybe they'll start going to shear more. That could be one idea. But also, I think it was making fun of the specific YU Rosh Yeshiva, who was allowing them to not be in shear as often as he would do. So I think that because he took it personally himself, that's why I would categorize it as making fun of an individual as opposed to a group of people.
So a group of people would be different categorically?
I think so. I think a group of people would be categorically, because they don't feel the pressure of being made fun of all on themselves. Going back to The Office, actually, if you think about it, in the roast of Michael Scott in the beginning of the episode, all the pressure was on him. Everyone's making fun of him directly. At the end of the episode, he is making fun of a large group of people around him. Granted, they're all individuals, but they are all a part of, his Dunder Mifflin community. So I think in this case, with the YU Rosh Yeshiva, granted, we were making fun of the individuals in his shear, but he was the individual who was almost responsible for being made fun of the klal, the group around him.
Thank you. I think I enabled everyone to unmute. So if you have a question, you can unmute and ask Rabbi Schwartz directly. There we go. So
in the Rutgers Hillel has a.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I think I actually muted you, Rabbi Schwartz.
So that's a good question. So Shira, who's our resident Israeli, we like Israel. We like Israel, right? We like Israel. We like Israel. Shira asked, we got 2 thumbs up. We got 2 thumbs up from Gloria. 2 thumbs up for Gloria for Israel. She sends back 2 thumbs up back to you. So Shira asked a great question. She says, so permission, and guess mechila, the forgiveness of Lashon Hara, could apply in Lashon Hara in this case, but can it also apply to other Averot? Let's just say, here's a good example, boxing. Boxing. Who doesn't love a great boxing match? I don't. I don't love a good boxing match, but people do. People do. My mom's from Panama. In Panama, they love boxing. Love boxing. Roberto Duran, my mom speaks about this big match that happened years ago. Roberto Duran leaves the boxing ring and says, no mas. Questions whether he threw it or not. My mom has conspiracy theories. Fine. But what if me and Buzzy are going for a boxing match? And I say, Buzzy, I give you full permission to sock me in the face. And Buzzy says, Rav Avi, I give you full permission to sock me in the face. Is that permissible? Is that permissible? Is there mechila for that? I don't know. I'm not going to try to make up an answer. I don't know. That is a really good question, and I will do some research to find out. It could be that would be permissible. It could be permissible if we're giving, okay, we will shake on it, getting into a fight. Okay, everything's off limits. Everything's on limits. Good question. I don't know. Rabbi Kurtz, what do you think about that one?
Well, the discussion is if it's analogous to Ma'avid Atzma Ledas. I mean, God forbid one is not allowed to take their own life. So the question is chavala, if you're allowed to actually harm yourself. And halachically, most would assume you can't do it, so you wouldn't be able to be mochel someone else. But this is the question whether the paintball match also can be mochel on getting a bruise. So, I forgot what's Minchas Chinuch or someone, it's been a long time, but it's machlokas, like most things.
That makes sense. Yeah, most things in Judaism are machlokas. Aptly said. Wait, Yaakov. That's a good point. Yaakov says that every camp has a paintball trip. I don't know. I want to see the stats on that one. I want to see the stat. I want to see the Pew survey. Is every camp has a paintball trip? Maybe. My camp did not. I went to Camp Mosheva growing up. Maybe. I don't know. But it's possible that in a paintball kind of regard, you might say that it's not necessarily likely, or it's very possible, but it's not a given. It's not a psik resha, a chicken cooked without their head, maybe in Yavin, if you know, that you're going to get hurt. But in paintball, it might be part of the discussion of it's possible it might happen. So there is a roundtable mechila, everyone shakes on it beforehand, says, I'm okay with getting hurt because I might hurt you, which is a really morbid thing to say, but it sounds like that could be the right answer. Buzzy.
Accept the loss. You never actually had an intention. So even with these sports or boxing, you're not going to agree to a message that you're going to lose. You never do.
That's a great point, right, Chris? Do you hear that? Everyone hear that point? He's saying it's very much like gambling. If you are playing poker with someone else and you are confident you're going to win, and when you don't, you have to give up the money. At first, you say, okay, you know what? If I lose, I'll give up the money. But then when you actually lose, the money's being taken from me. And so much so as if you're, let's say, buying Super Bowl boxes, for example. In theory, but Super Bowl boxes for tzedakah could be a different story. But in any case, gambling also might be a similar kind of question. Gambling not for tzedakah could be a very similar kind of question. Are you really being mochel on your money? If you are gambling, are you really being mochel on your physical harm? And goes back even to the Lashon Hara question. Are you really being mochel on your embarrassment? Because listen, up to a point, I'm okay with being embarrassed, but then he called me fat. That's that's too much, So how do you draw the line? Another great question. I don't know.
Well, Rabbi Schwartz, I want to thank you for your time. This was a really engaging shir. It answered a number of questions and it raised a lot for us to think about as we head into the holiday of Purim. So I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank the members of Agudah Shalom, the members of the Rutgers JLIC and community that are with you, as well as other guests. I see Rabbi Daniel Alberts here as well. Thank you guys. Looking forward to continuing next week in our series. We got 3 more shiurim to go. I'll be delivering a shiur next week on cross-dressing and cross-conduct, gender and halacha. Don't worry, I know I've given this shiur at the shul before, but last time we glossed over the Purim Makoros. This time we'll delve deeper into the Purim Makoros. So there'll be a lot to analyze on Purim, cross-dressing, and year-round. Okay, welcome, Mark Waxel. I will make you the host for your 8:30 shiur, and then I bid you all a Laila Tov.